hiker's boots or a dog's paw.
But then the Department of Conservation, have been confident, or they've said they're confident the risk of disease spreading by human traffic is very low as well. So there are, again, it's...
But it has, and look, it has been spread. The experts have I think been pretty clear in saying that this is, we have one last shot to have a crack at saving these trees. So either you're in or you're an idiot.
Yep. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in court for sure. It's 4 to the hour. And I'm sure you've seen on the news and had posts from your Aussie mates that across the Tasman, they've had quite the heat wave, feeling all too keenly the effects of climate change. Well, now daylight saving might be altered to take into account the searing heat that is occurring regularly in the Great Southern Land summers. Later leaver there, Jodie Mackay, is lobbying the New South Wales government to consider shortening the period daylight savings covers, because the longer light in the evening is not conducive to be outdoors. Sometimes the mercury still hits 40 degrees Celsius at 8 at night. It's long been a contentious issue across the Tasman. 2 states, of course, Queensland and Western Australia, they don't adjust their clocks. So what do you think, Tim? Do you think perhaps the focus should be on what's causing the climate change to be so extreme, or rather than the clocks?
I get the point that if you're up at the hotter hours, then you'll be using electricity and so forth to try and cool yourself down. So maybe that has an impact. But it's interesting, towards the end of that story and one or two others, the science is not at all conclusive whether there's much of a link between daylight saving and climate change at all. So until we have the science, I'd say, chill.
Don't understand that one. Yeah.
Are you a supporter of daylight saving?
Oh gosh, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry, farmers.
Makes me so happy. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind your cows out in the grazing in the winter, but give me my daylight.
Yeah, we need the daylight saving.
Well, it'll be an interesting one to see if that law goes through.
I must say, I just feel for the Australians. They've got so much in front of them when it comes to their climate, their extremes, and what to do about it.
And this was someone writing to their MP going, it's a bit hard going for a walk at 8 o'clock at night and it's still been 40 degrees. Can we not change that? And I'm going, 40 degrees at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Shoot me now.
Some positive news to finish the show, the panel today. The world's first HIV-positive sperm bank has just opened here in New Zealand. It's been initiated by New Zealand AIDS Foundation, Positive Women Inc. and Body Positive. 3 donors have signed up so far, each with consistently undetectable viral load. That means the virus cannot be passed on to others. New Zealand AIDS Foundation says that sperm positive has opened up because HIV-positive men are not previously able to donate sperm, so that really is great. And we've seen with interviews too with some of the donors that, in the past they've been bullied, they've felt as though they've never been able to have children. This is very positive.
I did not know that you could donate sperm safely if you're HIV positive, so I've learned something new today, and I think that's a first. And I can see if you're trying to destigmatise, this is a really powerful message to send in terms of destigmatising. If it is safe, as they say, then this is a really powerful message.
I know, it is interesting that the attitude towards people who are HIV positive has changed so much over the years, hasn't it? There was so much discrimination against them in the 80s when people first became aware of it.
Yeah,
it's
the fear of the unknown, and now we know.
And it's great to see New Zealand setting off this initiative. You've been listening to the panel with Tim Watkin and Sharon Brett Kelly. I'm Mike Rehu. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, a jury considers the fate of the Dunedin doctor accused of stabbing teenager Amber Rose Rush to death. In Samoa, 200 people are hospitalised with measles and another child dies. An Auckland lawyer and a top dog in a motorcycle gang admit cleaning up millions of dollars in dirty money. The opening of a suicide prevention office is a bittersweet moment for the Prime Minister. The ride's over for a whangare rodeo, animal welfare issues or just tight on money. And it was lights out in Northland with power cut to 80,000 customers, so who pulled the plug? And shove over, would you? Emergency services remind Auckland drivers to get out of the way. Don't forget, you can check us out on Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The immigration industry says Trump-style extreme vetting is being used to keep a lid on immigration numbers. New residents fell to the lowest level since the turn of the century this year, despite a sharp increase in applications. Immigration New Zealand denies it's trying to slow visa processing. It blames rising visa application volumes and their complexity and risk. The Association for Migration and Investments Chair June Ranson says officials are asking immigrants for information in a piecemeal manner.
It's almost as if they've been told to go slow, and when a case officer can come back and ask for any additional information, you'd think they'd come back and ask for all the things extra they need. The problem is you give them that, and then it's almost as if they invent another question.
June Ranson questions whether there are ulterior motives to the change in practices. An immigration lawyer, Richard Small, says there is a growing culture of extreme vetting. The National Party's proposal to set up a police unit with the sole purpose of crushing gangs has been ridiculed by a former Australian detective. The party's leader, Simon Bridges, has repeatedly described New South Wales Strike Force Raptor team as a huge success and an example to follow. He's even pointed to media reports which claim the squad's uncompromising approach has driven bikies to near extinction. But former New South Wales officer Mike Kennedy, now a senior lecturer at the University of Western Sydney, says that's simply nonsense.
He needs to pull his head out of whatever it's stuck in, because it simply isn't the case. People don't stop being members of groups just because they've been arrested. They go into jail, they reinforce themselves, they come out, they get more of a reason to remain in the group they're in. I just think he's living a dream if he's thinking that, you know, and I'm not a bleeding heart liberal.
Dr. Mike Kennedy, a former detective and now academic. A truck driver who ran a red light and killed 2 people has been sentenced to community work this afternoon in the Christchurch District Court. Casey James Winter pleaded guilty to careless driving, causing the deaths of Fulumoa Daly and his 12-year-old nephew Ezekiel Tenielu Luau in August. Winter was sentenced to 4 months community detention, community work, and was disqualified from driving for 1.5 years. He'll also pay $20,000 to the victim's family. The court heard powerful statements from the family during today's sentencing. The parents of a 4-year-old who survived the crash with serious head injuries both forgave Mr. Winter. The court heard how Judge Tony Couch believed Winter to be remorseful. Maintenance on one of Transpower's 2 circuits into Northland has been halted until it identifies the cause of a major power outage in the region. About 80,000 customers north of Warkworth were without power for almost 3 hours this morning when the circuit tripped while the backup was down for repairs. Transpower's Chief Executive Alison Andrews says it's not clear what caused the outage, but she says the company has taken steps to ensure the Northland circuit is secure.
Until such time as we understand what caused the tripping, we won't be continuing with the maintenance that we need to do on that other circuit.
Alison Andrew of Transpower. A Red Cross worker in Samoa says hospital staff are under immense pressure as they grapple with the measles epidemic. The death toll has risen to 33. Most of the deaths are children under the age of 4. About 200 people with the disease remain in hospital. New Zealand has a team of medical experts helping local authorities on the ground as well as members of the Red Cross. Karen Page of the Red Cross says hospital staff are under immense pressure and working around the clock.
The hospital here desperately is needing qualified ICU, general and paediatric nurses just to cope with the workload.
Karen Page says she's preparing to spend Christmas in Samoa if she's required to stay and help. The jury in the trial of a former Dunedin doctor accused of murdering teenager Amber Rose Rush has retired to deliberate its verdict. Bernard Scanther denies killing the 16-year-old in February last year. The 32-year-old doctor is also accused of threatening to kill the prosecution's key witness and his family. The Crown says Mr. Scanther murdered Miss Rush to stop her coming forward with claims he was touching up minors, supplying them with alcohol and offering money for sex. The defence says the prosecution's key witness is responsible for Miss Rush's death. And summing up, Justice Gerald Nation told the jurors they need to be sure, beyond reasonable doubt, who wielded the knife that killed Miss Rush.
It is common ground that when Amber Rose Rush was on her bed, someone cut into her neck, causing her to bleed to death. The real issue is whether you are satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that Dr. Scanther was the person who killed Amber Rose Rush.
Justice Gerald Nation. It's 5:05. The England all-rounder Ben Stokes says he's reassured teammate Jofra Archer that the racial taunts he was subjected to in the first cricket test in Mount Maunganui are not representative of New Zealand. Stokes, who grew up in New Zealand before moving to England, says the New Zealand public has shown plenty of support for Archer in the wake of the incident, and the England team has made it clear to him they have his back.
It's a shame because that doesn't represent what New Zealand is about as a country. Jofra's received a huge amount of support from us as players and as a squad, making him aware that we've got his back in a pretty horrific incident, something that shouldn't happen at sport or in the world in general in 2019.
Meanwhile, Black Caps pace bowler Trent Boult and all-rounder Colin de Grantom have been ruled out of the second test due to injury. Uncapped Northern Districts all-rounder Daryl Mitchell has been called into the squad. 5 Grand Slam champions will compete at the Women's ASB Tennis Classic in Auckland in January. Former world number 1 Caroline Wozniacki, 2017 French Open champion Yelena Ostapenko and Russian player Svetlana Kuznetsova have all confirmed joining other Grand Slam winners Bianca Andreescu and Serena Williams. The former Wallabies fullback Israel Folau has raised his compensation claim against Rugby Australia and the New South Wales Waratahs to nearly $15 million. Folau was previously seeking just over $10 million in damages following the termination of his 4-year contract after he posted a message on social media that said hell awaited homosexuals and other groups. That's the news.
National doubles down on gangs.
The tough on crime approach is right. I think if you don't do that, you breed more criminals.
But experts say it won't work.
The rhetoric and the approach to justice issues that are outlined in this document really reek of the 18th century.
And gang members say it creates problems.
Just looking through the Bill of Rights, it's actually illegal to harass people. We're actually human beings, and we have rights also.
Though according to Simon Bridges,
populist doesn't mean it's wrong.
Patch in for Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, a warning to Kiwi shoppers over the Black Friday sales. They may not be all they're cracked up to be. And after 10, the extraordinary story of the fake cryptocurrency OneCoin and the disappearance of its founder. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine tonight. A few showers developing tomorrow afternoon, turning to rain at night. For Wellington and Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, fine tonight, cloudy periods tomorrow. For the remainder of the North Island, fine. Isolated afternoon and evening showers tomorrow, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. Nelson and Bulla mainly fine tonight, a few showers developing tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury fine with high cloud. Norwesterly gales about the Canterbury High Country. Chance of a shower in southern Canterbury tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland periods of rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms for Fiordland and South Westland. Otago and Southland scattered rain, heavy and possibly thundery about inland Clutha, Dunedin and North Otago tomorrow. Chatham Islands fine today, cloudy tomorrow. RNZ National. It's coming up to 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A jury in the High Court murder trial of Vinod Scanther has retired to decide if the former Dunedin hospital doctor is guilty or not. The 32-year-old denies killing 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush in her bedroom in February last year. Mr Scanther is also accused of threatening to kill the prosecution's key witness and his family. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has been following the case.
Did Vinod Scanther kill Amber Rose Rush? That decision now rests in the hands of 10 men and 2 women. Justice Gerald Nation told the jurors the prosecution and the defence agree on some aspects of the case.
It is common ground that when Amber Rose Rush was on her bed, someone cut into her neck with a sharp instrument, causing her to bleed to death. The person who cut her neck must have intended to kill her. The real issue is whether you are satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that Dr. Scantha was the person who killed Amber Rose Rush.
Justice Nation says it's the Crown's case that Dr. Scantha killed Miss Rush to stop her coming forward with claims he was touching up minors, supplying them alcohol and offering money for sex. The Crown says Dr. Scantha's career was already on thin ice with Dunedin Hospital, as he was sanctioned for treating a patient while off duty and after drinking in July 2017. But Dr. Scantha's defence says it wasn't him that killed Miss Rush, and the prosecution's key witness, a teenage boy with name suppression, stabbed her. They say that was the result of some kind of misplaced loyalty to Bernard Scantha after Miss Rush aired the pair's dirty laundry on social media.
The proposition the defence advanced was that he alone was Amber Rush's killer and that Dr. Scantha had nothing to do with it.
Justice Nation addressed defence lawyer Jonathan Eaton QC's claim that if the jury believed the prosecution's witness played a role in Miss Rush's death, then it needed to acquit Dr. Scantha. Justice Nation says that's not correct, and the jury just needs to be confident, beyond reasonable doubt, Dr. Scantha killed the teenager.
A reasonable doubt is an honest and reasonable uncertainty left in your mind about the guilt of Dr. Scantha on the particular charge after you have given careful and impartial consideration to all the evidence.
He told the jury that during the trial they had heard a level of detail about Dr. Scantha's and other witnesses' lives that was unusual for a murder trial.
You've heard a body of evidence from various witnesses as to Dr. Scantha's alleged sexual misconduct, potentially criminal sexual offending with 3 young women. Now, as I've already explained to you, often a jury never hears about a defendant's conduct on occasions other than he is charged with.
Justice Nation says it was necessary in this case as it went some way towards offering a motive.
The Crown case is that he did have such a motive in that Amber Rush had told him she was serious about going to the police and the hospital and telling them about his supplying minors with alcohol, offering them money for sex and touching up minors without consent.
The jury retired to deliberate its verdicts about 2:45 this afternoon. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
And of course, we will bring you any developments in that case as they come to hand. There's been another death in Samoa's measles epidemic, bringing the toll to 33. All but 4 of the deaths are children under the age of 4, including one who died in the past day. About 200 people with the disease remain in hospital. A mass vaccination campaign is underway and dozens of New Zealand nurses are in Samoa to assist. Jonathan Mitchell has the latest.
Karen Page is a health delegate with the Red Cross and is preparing to spend Christmas in Samoa if she's required to stay and help. She arrived on Sunday and is working in the capital, Apia. She's one of 7 who have travelled to help get everyone immunised as quickly as possible, as well as educating locals that it takes a couple of weeks before the vaccination is fully effective. Karen Page has seen a young boy, probably about 8 years old, isolated and waiting to be taken to hospital.
We have a little roped off area for children that come on with suspected measles, and they're all referred to the hospital. But, very clearly the main symptoms are a bit of a sniffle, but then with measles they get very, very red eyes, and that's a typical symptom of measles. So he was just waiting for his mum to pick him up, and he was being shipped off for assessment at the hospital.
She's not sure if he's now one of the victims, and she says hospital staff are under immense pressure.
The hospital here desperately is needing qualified ICU, general and paediatric nurses just to cope with the workload.
Karen Page says the effects from the epidemic are widespread.
The schools are closed. They've banned public gatherings that include children under 19 years old. The swimming pools are closed, things like that. I heard this morning they're going to close the nightclubs as well.
Andrea Chapman, who's also working for the Red Cross, has been travelling door to door around the capital, vaccinating people against measles. She says she's probably jabbed about 60 today.
Once you're there, they do tend to, they all want vaccines. I think because there's been a lot of, obviously, anti-vaccine comments and up until now, but now they're all very keen to be vaccinated, at least that's what I've come across.
She says some households have kids with measles, but they're on the path to recovery and not in any danger.
The children that are home, they just make a recovery, an uneventful recovery without complications.
The director of the Immunisation Advisory Centre at Auckland University, Nikki Turner, says it's unclear how long the epidemic will last.
The answer is that people have either had measles now or they urgently need to be immunised. Once people have either had measles or they're immunised, the virus can then no longer spread. So there's a real urgency about vaccinating as many people as rapidly as possible who have not yet come in contact with measles.
New Zealand's government is on standby with more support if that's requested by Samoan authorities. For Checkpoint's call, Jonathan Mitchell, Tēnei.
And the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, actually, I think we're moving to a different story there. Let's go to Northland. The Rodeo Association says the cancellation of one of its summer events is a blip, not a trend, and it's confident rodeo's popularity is not waning in the face of opposition. Animal welfare group SAFE says the scrapping of the mid-northern rodeo near Whangarei is partially a result of a boycott and the public turning against rodeos and taking their money with them. They say its social licence has expired. But the national body, which says it's acting on animal welfare concerns, says it's doing just fine and will ride on. Jordan Bond reports.
The Mid-Northern Rodeo canned for 2020. Committee member Diana Bradshaw's gutted that they don't have enough money to put January's two-day event on near Whangarei, even though it's drawn decent crowds.
It's happening since the 60s. It's a huge part of that community. It's used as a fundraising for the local pony club, so the kids are missing out. It's a huge thing.
Protesters bought tickets to last year's one and tried to film events, but were met with angry spectators. Animal welfare group SAFE's spokesperson, Will Appleby, thinks protests since a 2017 event have had some effect.
So footage emerged from that rodeo that showed quite appalling treatment of animals, including an animal handler who was illegally shocking young calves with a cattle prod. Following that, many businesses who were sponsoring that rodeo withdrew their support. The reality is business and the public are voting with their wallets, and the organisers are now strapped for cash.
But Lyle Cox from the Rodeo Cowboys Association says that's rubbish. And the other 34 events around the country are doing fine and will go ahead.
No, it's not a sign of a trend. It's just one club made the decision. I think a responsible decision. It is regrettable. But hey, I'd rather they did that and come back with a strong and successful rodeo in 2021.
Mr Cox says they've made changes over animal welfare concerns, including lifting the minimum weight so animals under 200 kilograms, including most calves, won't be used.
So the changes we make are not for the protesters. The changes we make are for the good of the sport and, like I say, for those three areas, the contestants, spectators and animal welfare.
An independent animal welfare advisory committee reported to the government about a year ago and found all 7 events at normal rodeos were of concern. 4 were rated of moderate concern and 2 serious. The Labour Party campaigned pre-election to ban some aspects of rodeo, flank straps, young calves and electric prods, but have not. Outgoing Green MP Gareth Hughes has a private members' bill waiting to be drawn that proposes to ban all rodeo activities.
I'm convinced rodeo is on the wrong side of the history books. You know, our attitudes to the way we treat animals has changed markedly, and I think hurting them simply for entertainment has no place in modern New Zealand history. You know, much like once upon a time, bear baiting, dog fighting, cockfighting were all considered legitimate community activities. You know, we'd be horrified by those activities today.
Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor's picked up the animal welfare portfolio since Meka Whaitiri was stripped of hers. He wasn't available for an interview but says in a statement he expects the highest animal welfare standards at rodeos this summer. For the first time, the Ministry for Primary Industries will be at all 34 planned rodeos this summer, as will a vet and, inevitably, protesters. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei ko Jordan Bond, tēnei.
It's almost 20 past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know how you feel about rodeos. Have they passed their use-by date as a form of entertainment, or do you still think they're popular and support them going ahead? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has described the opening of a suicide prevention office as a bittersweet milestone. The office was one of the key recommendations of the Mental Health and Addiction Inquiry and a crucial part of the government's $40 million investment in suicide prevention in this year's wellbeing budget. Last year, 685 New Zealanders are believed to have taken their own lives, with young people, Māori and Pacifica communities the most affected. The government hopes the office will be a galvanising force in tackling New Zealand's woeful suicide rates. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
A strong message from former All Black and Head First Ambassador Nehe Milner-Skudder at this morning's opening.
It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail, it's okay to not be okay, and it's also okay to talk about it.
Milner-Skudder says having a dedicated office like this will help break down barriers to people seeking help.
We all have challenges we face, so whether it's you, a mate or a family member feeling down, anxious or finding things tough, you're not alone. There's help out there, there are people you can talk to and ways to make things better.
Jacinda Ardern told the room that everyone will know someone affected by suicide, and described the opening as a bittersweet moment.
It's bitter because New Zealand's heartbreakingly high rate of suicide is shameful, and we all want New Zealand's future to be different. This new office represents hope that we can turn things around.
Health Minister David Clark says suicide has touched every New Zealander in some way, and as a funeral celebrant, he has seen firsthand the intense suffering of families burying loved ones.
Our nation's woeful suicide rate is certainly nothing to celebrate, but we can all celebrate positive action. And while it may take time before our suicide rates reduce, because it is a complex challenge, I'm confident that the Suicide Prevention Office will galvanise action.
The Suicide Prevention Office will initially operate within the Ministry's Mental Health and Addiction Directorate, with the aim of eventually being a standalone agency. Its director, Carla Nanakorn, says today isn't about opening a bricks and mortar structure, but marking a shared commitment.
I do believe that we can turn things around and that we can bring our suicide rate down, but I also believe that this will only be achieved if the nature of the problem that we face is well understood and if collective responsibility is accepted for addressing the many drivers of suicide.
Today, the government also announced a $12 million Māori and Pacific Suicide Prevention Community Fund. Over the next 4 years, it will support providers designing and delivering culturally responsive suicide prevention initiatives. National is welcoming the announcement, but says there also needs to be a focus on the rural community, where suicides have increased by 17%. Its mental health spokesperson, Matt Ducey, says the government also needs to introduce a reduction target.
We need to be able to measure ourselves, and ultimately when you measure something then you can allocate resources. So at the moment we believe we should be working towards the Mental Health Inquiry's recommendation of a suicide reduction target.
But Ms Ardern disagrees, saying an arbitrary target isn't helpful and that the aspiration must be no suicides because one suicide is one too many. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
Transpower says it's still trying to figure out what caused a massive power outage to the top of the North Island today. A circuit supplying power to Northland and the far north tripped at about 9:30 this morning, while the backup was down for maintenance. The outage affected about 80,000 customers north of Warkworth, leaving much of the region without power. Katie Scotcher reports.
Mike Graham would normally be toasting bagels and making coffee at the Hellhole Cafe in Russell, but an unexpected power cut at 9:30 this morning forced him to take the day off.
It's okay, I think we'll just take the boat out.
Good weather where you are?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Most businesses north of Warkworth shut up shop for the morning or day, unable to operate without power. Mike Graham was in the middle of serving a customer when the power cut.
His bagel was just about to go through the toaster machine and then it stopped. so he ate half a cold bagel and he spat the rest out. Cold bacon's probably not ideal.
Mr Graham was in good spirits despite the closure and the potential loss of chilled stock. The Marsden Point oil refinery also lost power and had to shut down its system. It's now in the process of restarting operations. Its spokesperson, Greg McNeil, says locals would have noticed a large flame flaring from the plant.
We've got a lot of refining product under pressure and under heat. When you get a loss of power, you need to actually have a safety valve to release those gases safely. So we have what's called a flare at the end of the plant.
By 1 o'clock this afternoon, North Power and Top Energy were able to supply power to the region again. Transpower says it still doesn't know what caused the outage. Its chief executive, Alison Andrew, says a helicopter has been sent to try and find out.
What we do is when we have a fault on the circuit, we will often fly a line to see if we can see any obvious evidence of what may have caused the trip. For instance, a damaged conductor, failed insulators. There's various things that can happen, and a visual test can be a very helpful way of understanding whether we have a further risk or what might have give us some help as to what might have caused the issue.
She says it's the fourth loss of supply in 5 years and the second this year.
That's not something that we want to happen, and we're making sure that we understand what caused this issue and that we take the requisite steps to learn from that.
Alison Andrews says maintenance on the second circuit has been paused until the cause of the fault is identified. Mo te hōtaka o te akiaki nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
Well, hopefully you had batteries for your wireless then if you were in that Northland area without power. Let us know how you got on today. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A former Australian detective has ridiculed the National Party's zero-tolerance approach to gangs, saying the strategy has been a disaster across the ditch. The opposition is pitching a police unit based on New South Wales's Strike Force Raptor team. But a former Australian cop and now academic says it has actually driven the gangs underground there. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The name guaranteed it would hit the headlines. Strike Force Raptor, an opposition proposal borrowed from abroad. An elite police squad modelled on one like it in New South Wales, designed to punish gang members through all legal avenues, coming after them for any infraction, from parking fine to punch-up.
It has been hugely successful. It's been devastatingly effective. It has been devastatingly effective.
But on RNZ this morning, Simon Bridges struggled to point to hard evidence backing that up.
We are at this moment, in fact, talking to the government in New South Wales to compile the data.
The data has not yet been forthcoming. RNZ has also had difficulty tracking down the stats. Requests to the New South Wales Police were at first rebuffed and then not answered.
We will put out some data in the next little while to make clear the case. But what is also true is if you just Google Strike Force Raptor units and you look at the stories and the commentary,
you'll see, he says, it's been a success. It's true that a Google search does bring up some effusive accounts, like this 9 News report which Mr Bridges has shared on Twitter.
Strike Force Raptor has made life hell for outlaw bikie gangs and is responsible for more than 5,000 arrests in the past decade. They've also laid more than 12,000 charges, seized 1,700 illegal firearms and shut down more than 50 clubhouses.
But that's not all that Google uncovers. It also finds articles alleging stalking and intimidation by the police unit. It finds serious misconduct. A team member known as Raptor 13, who was recently put on restricted duties for threatening 2 Muslim women. And it finds videos of aggressive and confrontational encounters with members of the public.
It's just been a disaster.
Mike Kennedy is a former detective from the New South Wales Police Force. He spent much of his service as an undercover cop working in organised crime and is now a senior lecturer at the University of Western Sydney.
There's no local, there's no national and there's no international evidence that zero tolerance as a principal operational strategy is successful or that it works.
Dr Kennedy says it's nonsense to suggest gang numbers in New South Wales have dramatically dropped over the past decade.
How would you know? They're not required to pay a fee to be a member of the gang and register with government.
And as for Mr Bridges' references to reports that the bikies have been driven near extinction...
He needs to pull his head out of whatever it's stuck in, because it simply isn't the case. People don't stop being members of groups just because they've been arrested. They go into jail, they reinforce themselves, they come out, they get more of a reason to remain in the group they're in. I just think he's living a dream if he's thinking that, you know, and I'm not a bleeding heart liberal.
Dr Kennedy says groups like Strikeforce Raptor ultimately turn the public against the police. People view the authorities as unreasonable and refuse to cooperate with other investigations.
If the public doesn't trust you, and if the organised crime community doesn't trust you to do your job, you haven't succeeded. All you've done is driven the problem underground, which is what no one wants.
The proposal is not yet official National Party policy. The opposition is still sounding out the idea with the public. But historically, such tough-on-crime rhetoric has been popular with voters. To that, Dr Kennedy sounds a final cautionary note.
Might get him into office. The problem is it's also going to get him out of office in the long term.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Checkpoint on RNZ National claims Immigration New Zealand are using Trump-style extreme vetting to keep immigration down. A lawyer pleads guilty to money laundering, which allegedly aided the Comancheros Motorcycle Club, and how getting rid of your rubbish could soon cost a whole lot more. We'd love your feedback. What do you make of this idea for a Strikeforce Raptor group? Is it a good idea, or is it just authorised thuggery? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. We would love to hear from you. Let's go now to the headlines with Susanna.
The immigration industry says Trump-style extreme vetting is being used to keep a lid on immigration numbers. The number of new residents has fallen to the lowest level since the turn of the century, despite a sharp increase in applications. Immigration New Zealand is denying it's trying to slow visa processing and blames rising visa application volumes and their complexity and risk. But the Association for Migration and Investment is questioning whether there are ulterior motives to the change in practices. The jury in the trial of a former Dunedin doctor accused of murdering teenager Amber Rose Rush is tonight considering its verdict. 32-year-old Bernard Scanther denies killing the 16-year-old in February last year and threatening to kill the prosecution's key witness. The Crown says Mr Scanther murdered Miss Rush to stop her coming forward with claims he was touching up minors, supplying them with alcohol and offering money for sex. A Red Cross worker in Samoa says hospital staff are under immense pressure as they grapple with the country's measles epidemic. The death toll has risen to 33, with 200 people in hospital. New Zealand has a team of medical experts helping local authorities on the ground, as well as members of the Red Cross who say hospital staff are working around the clock. Maintenance on one of Transpower's two circuits in Northland has been halted until it identifies the cause of a major power outage in the region. About 80,000 customers north of Warkworth were without power for almost 3 hours this morning when the circuit tripped while the backup was down for repairs. Transpower says it's not clear what caused the outage. An animal welfare group is claiming protests and business backlash has played a part in a Rodeo event being cancelled this summer. The Mid-Northern Rodeo has been cancelled for 2020 because there's not enough money to run it. SAFE's spokesperson Will Appleby says recent protesting has played a part in the cancellation and resulted in cash being pulled from the event. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time now for business. And Nona Palsiage joined me in the studio. Nona, so the Reserve Bank, they were expected to make their announcement today about loan-to-value ratios. What's the deal?
Yeah, so of course those are the restrictions that they place on the banks to restrict their lending. And they've kept them in place. That was not what most economists were thinking. They were thinking that the Reserve Bank had room to loosen that, as to, I guess, in line with their generally looser monetary policy. But they didn't. And the Reserve Bank governor, basically, the reason behind it was that the Reserve Bank governor isn't convinced that the banks would act responsibly in holding back and just filling their coffers with high-risk lending.
Yeah, and we should be clear, what we're talking about here is the requirement to have a reasonably fat deposit.
That's right.
When you get a mortgage, so 20% or...
20% for, and I think 30% for investors. So it's still there. And that's been holding back a lot of first-time home buyers because houses are expensive, a big deposit. And the thing is, the Reserve Bank is concerned that if they loosen that, people would put down a smaller deposit, but then they would be faced with a very large mortgage at a low interest rate. But then low interest rates can turn, even though the Reserve Bank has said, and clearly said, that low interest rate environment will continue for some time. The situation can change quite quickly, nevertheless. And so if it happened, you might find yourself saddled with a very large debt and increasing interest rates.
So the governor doesn't trust the banks to pull on the handbrake themselves?
No, the bank is saying that the Reserve Bank would like to see the banks change their behavior. And as we know, the bank's behavior has been under the spotlight for a while, so they certainly aren't finding favor with the regulators at the moment, that's for sure.
Okay, so what's been going on with Fisher & Paykel today as well?
Okay, well, Fisher & Paykel, it just seems like, dare I say, it seems like it's a money-making machine. Really doing very well. Even when they're not doing very well, they're doing very well. And their expectations are that that's going to continue well into the future. They think that the market is basically untapped in many large markets for their products. So what they manufacture are masks for sleep apnea and other kind of lung issues.
So you're talking about their health wing.
Yes, that's what they only have. That's all it is. Fisher & Paykel Healthcare is, in fact, only Fisher & Paykel. The other company is different. It was sold off a long time ago. So we're talking about the listed company, which is the healthcare arm, and it healthcare business. Don't get me used on that arm. There's no arm. It's just one business. But they have manufacturing in Mexico, and that facility has been ramping up. They really have great expectations for their products. Their legal woes, and they have very strong competition, are behind them, so they see nothing but clear sailing. And their share price rose more than 1.5% on a very strong first half result. They were up a quarter to $121.2 million in the first half. That's a hefty profit on total revenue growth of 12% to more than $500 million. So good company, pays a big dividend, and continues to grow. So, hey, what more do you want, right?
So, any other good news on the market? Let's do a whip around.
Absolutely. You're going to love these numbers. Okay, so the top 50 index, it finished strong, rising 0.7%, 76 points to 11,121. And the New Zealand dollar is creeping up. So 64.3 US cents, 94.8 Australian. And guess what? 50 British pence.
We cracked the 50.
How long has that been? I don't know. It seems like a very long time.
It seems like a long time, doesn't it, Nona?
Yes.
Thanks, Nona. Wrapping up all the numbers there for business this afternoon. The immigration industry is crying foul over what it says is Trump-style extreme vetting, aimed at keeping a lid on immigration numbers. The number of new residents to New Zealand is the lowest it's been in nearly 20 years, despite a sharp increase in applications. Immigration New Zealand denies there is an attempt to slow down visa processing, but people wanting to move here say they are facing more and more hurdles. Jill Bonnet reports.
The number of residence applications on hand rose sharply from a low of 15,000 in April last year to 35,000 last month. The chair of the Association for Migration and Investment, June Ranson, says officials are now asking immigrants for information in a slow and piecemeal manner.
It's almost as if they've been told to go slow. And when a case officer can come back and ask for any additional information, you'd think they'd come back and ask for all the things extra they need. The problem is you give them that, and then it's almost as if they invent another question.
She says long-term correspondence they're now in with case officers is more like being their pen pal.
It just drags out the application. So you wonder if there's ulterior motives to it.
She's not alone in her suspicions. Several immigration advisors and lawyers spoken to by RNZ say these changes to immigration practices are behind some of the delays. An immigration lawyer, Richard Small, says there's a growing culture of extreme vetting, similar to what's happening in the United States right now. An immigration advisor, Tony Alexander, says case officers are asking for information they don't usually request and which aren't always contained in immigration instructions. She says the orders to do that are coming from the top.
We're frequently told, oh, well, my technical advisor told me to ask for this. So they're being instructed from above, and it's a process of slowing down applications because technical advisors are senior people and they know the instructions very well as we do.
She says immigrants have been waiting so long that even their extended temporary visas are now expiring, leaving them with more expense and inconvenience. They're also being asked to resubmit evidence that's become outdated because of the delays. Immigration's General Manager of Border and Visa Operations, Nicola Hogg, said in a statement visa application numbers have been increasing steadily across all categories and the level of risk and complexity is also rising. She says case officers may make a request for additional information if they have insufficient evidence to make a decision. For Checkpoint, Jill Bonnet.
Get out of the way, please. That's the message from emergency services frustrated with Auckland drivers who are blocking their way as they rush to critical incidents. Lights flashing and sirens blazing. Dashcam footage released by the police shows some drivers wombling along in their lane for upwards of 20 seconds with a fire truck or police car on their tail, desperate to get past. Some of the drivers seem oblivious to the fact that they're in the way despite the deafening sirens. Tamaki Makoto Road Policing Manager Inspector Scott Webb says it's a problem, especially as emergency services are heading into the busy summer season.
The main problem that we're seeing and hearing from our staff is when emergency services are travelling to an incident, now that's fire, police or ambulance, often people don't really know what to do and essentially won't get out of the way.
Right, so you've got, sirens whirring and lights, all action stations, and what? They just sit there in front of you?
Yeah, pretty much. So some people, it's clear they don't know what to do. Other people actually, they're freaked out or startled with what's going on, and there's the occasional one that, will be playing a few games with us, but on the whole, people are just a little bit unclear about what to do when they see an emergency vehicle come up behind them. So we just want to just get that message out there, particularly coming into the busy season on the roads.
So have you noticed, is it a problem that's on the rise? I mean, how common is it?
You talk to the staff at each of the services. It is common. Sometimes it can be a couple of times a shift, and we've all seen some of the video clips where going to one incident, there's about 6 vehicles that just simply didn't get out of the way, or they took quite some time. So I suppose what people have to remember is that when they call for emergency service, whether it be fire, police or ambulance, the minutes and seconds count. That we need to get there as quickly and as safely as we can. And that applies, you have large, like fire engines, that they're pretty big units that pull, come in behind people, and still people will not even get out of the way.
So tell me, what are some of the dodgiest kind of things that your colleagues have seen out on the roads when they're behind people who are not pulling over?
Well, one of the worst would be on the motorways, on the motorway network, where someone will look in the rear vision mirror and see that there's lights, and they will simply slam on the brakes. So you're in the outside right-hand, the faster travelling lane, and they'll come to a complete stop. Now you can imagine a fire engine or ambulance or police car travelling to an incident at a higher speed, having to stop. It's pretty frightening for the emergency services and the person in that car. So it's clear they just don't know what to do at times.
I heard a rumour, maybe you can confirm it. What's the deal with the person folding the washing?
Yeah, I mean, those are things that you see.
So what exactly was that? Sorry.
Well, it's when emergency service vehicles are trying to get through the traffic, and they'll see someone totally distracted. Now, that one person, there's been people distracted using phones and other things, but there was a person actually folding washing. So there's a washing basket on the seat, and then the person sort of folding washing, multitasking while they're driving, obviously. But that's an example of how distracted some people can be. And I mean, the lights are pretty bright, and the sirens are extremely loud. So people just need to be aware of their surroundings when they're driving.
So I'm going to use a technical term here, Inspector. Is it just that Auckland drivers are plonkers?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's not just Auckland drivers. I mean, we police up into Northland and down into Waikato, and on rural and some of the arterial roads, people will do things like this. And what we're saying is just move to the left, get out of the way. We're very conscious of the fact in a congested motorway network, for those of us that live in Auckland, when it's completely gridlocked, it's not practical, and you just can't move across lanes to the left. So at times the emergency services will lane split, so they'll come up in between the lanes, and all we say is just move out of the way, and that would be the exception to moving to the left, as in a congested motorway network.
Okay, so those are some of the exceptions. But really, how hard is it? Talk us through it. What should drivers do? Okay, so they hear the siren, they see the lights, and their next move is what?
Well, move to the left. Move to the left and let the vehicles through. And look, we acknowledge at times in some of the built-up areas with roadworks, at times you can't do that. You are literally jammed. Well, there's not much you can do in those circumstances, but more often than not, there is a shoulder or at least an area you can move, slow down and move out of the way.
And that was Inspector Scott Webb. It sounds elementary, doesn't it? Maybe I'm missing something here, but you do need to go online, go onto our Facebook page or website so you can see the examples of the video that they're talking about. Second thing, I don't care enough about folding my washing to take it on my lap in the car. It is about 14 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one. Pull over to the left when you see emergency services coming up behind you. Why do people not get this? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 3 men in the US state of Maryland have been exonerated after spending 36 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. The men, who were teenagers at the time, were arrested for murdering Jewett Duckett in 1983. The 14-year-old was shot dead at his school in Baltimore, apparently for his jacket. Alfred Chestnut, Ransom Watkins and Andrew Stewart, who are now in their early 50s, have always protested their innocence and described their time in prison as torture. CNN's Bryn Gingras reports.
Free at last.
Oh, man. I've been always dreaming of this for this day.
Baltimore police ripped these 3 men from their homes on Thanksgiving Day 36 years ago for a murder they did not commit.
We're smiling. We're happy that we're free, but we got a lot to fix. Absolutely. This should have never happened.
But this is the first time I have been able to hug my son in about 20-some years.
Hugs weren't the only things missed. 2 of the men have never driven a car. They've actually spent more time behind bars than their homes, all because of what happened in 1983. Back then, police arrested and charged 16-year-olds Alfred Chestnut and Ransom Watkins and 17-year-old Andrew Stewart for the killing of a teenager at a Baltimore middle school. Police say the murder was over a sports jacket. Their smoking gun, a similar jacket found inside Chestnut's home despite no blood or gunshot evidence. His mother even had a receipt of purchase according to court paperwork. Still, they were sentenced to life behind bars.
I hate to put it like this, we went through hell.
A break in the case came when Chestnut filed for information and uncovered a pile of unseen evidence. Young witnesses were interviewed by police without their parents and told to, quote, get their story straight. An anonymous phone call even ID'd another suspect who was seen wearing the stolen jacket and confessing to the crime. But none of that was ever given to the men's defense team, attorneys say. For decades, the men maintained their innocence. Chestnut refused to confess even when the parole board considered releasing him if he did. Baltimore's Conviction Integrity Unit eventually looked over the case and set them free.
Bryn Gingras there. And to the UK now, the leader of Britain's Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, has been singled out by Britain's most senior Jewish leader, who questioned Mr Corbyn's fitness to be Prime Minister. In a bombshell for the Labour Party in the middle of the current election campaign, the chief rabbi says the poison of anti-Semitism has taken root at its heart. Mr Corbyn says there can be no place for racism in his party. The BBC's Laura Koonsberg reports.
Anti-Zionism is entirely different from anti-Semitism. Why?
Zionism is the belief in the...
This argument's been raging for more than 3 years. And it burst into the election campaign today. Since Jeremy Corbyn's been in charge, there have been constant accusations that Labour has allowed racism against Jews to creep in.
Mr Corbyn, are you fit for high office?
Right in the middle of this contest, he's right back in the middle of it. A leader of one of the country's main religions actually warning against a vote for Labour. Writing in The Times, the chief rabbi says Jews have watched with incredulity as supporters of the Labour leadership have hounded parliamentarians, party members and even staff out of the party for facing down anti-Jewish racism. Claims they're doing everything they can to crack down on it are a mendacious fiction, he says. And Labour's handling of the issue is incompatible with the British values of which we're so proud. The chief rabbi suggests a new poison, sanctioned from the very top, has taken root. With extraordinary timing, Jeremy Corbyn was always due to attend Labour's Race and Faith manifesto today. An hour later than planned, he took to the stage, repeating that he abhors racism in any form.
There is no place whatsoever for anti-Semitism in any shape or form or in any place whatsoever in modern Britain, and under a Labour government it will not be tolerated in any form whatsoever. I want to make that clear.
You Nazi apologist.
His critics aren't sure he's been clear enough, though, in the last few years. There was trouble from his old ally, Ken Livingstone, his remarks about Hitler. Some of Jeremy Corbyn's own past comments and associations have raised eyebrows too. And anti-Semitic abuse in the Labour Party led to 2 Jewish female MPs leaving. Labour says firmly they are making a huge effort to get to grips with the problem. But Rabbi Jonathan Romain believes there is real anxiety among the Jewish community.
For the first time, Jews have been looking over their shoulders. It's just something we're not used to. I'm born in Britain, I'm a British citizen. You know, Britain is my home, my values. Never has a party made me feel different.
Rabbi Jonathan Romain ending that report from Laura Koonsberg. A top player with Comanchero's motorcycle gang and an Auckland lawyer have admitted laundering millions of dollars in ill-gotten gains. Lawyer Andrew Simpson was named for the first time today as he pleaded guilty at the High Court at Auckland. The 42-year-old was one of a dozen people swept up in raids that saw police seize millions of dollars in assets in April. And the gang's local 2IC has also pleaded guilty. Our reporter Annika Smith was at court.
So in court at the weekly call-over in the High Court at Auckland, 2 of the people swept up in these raids were brought to the court for arraignment. So Andrew Simpson was one of them, the Auckland lawyer that was mentioned, and also the Comanchero's Vice President of the Auckland chapter, Tyson Daniels. Simpson pleaded guilty to 13 charges of money laundering. He stood quite quietly and solemnly in the dock, and we actually heard that his wife was sitting in the public gallery for the arraignment. He pleaded guilty to each of the charges, and Justice Small actually remanded him on bail, but with a stern warning that a sentence of home detention for these charges was far from assured in his case. Interim name suppression that he had enjoyed until today had lapsed and there wasn't a fresh application. So today is the first time that we were able to publicly identify him as one of the people charged in connection to these raids.
So basically he's revealed as this white-collar lawyer who's involved in money laundering.
Money laundering millions and millions of dollars, yes. Tyson Daniels was also brought to court for arraignment. He pleaded guilty to 9 charges of money laundering and a further charge of participating in an organised criminal group. So these 2 men will be brought back to court in February next year for sentencing.
Yeah, remind us what happened during these police raids, and when we're talking about money laundering, what was the money going into, do we know?
Those details have yet to be revealed in court, but it was a massive operation or sting at the time. People remember in April there was a flood of police news reports. They had executed search warrants at 10 Auckland properties as part of an operation called Operation Nova. They seized $4 million roughly worth of assets. This included 2 houses, 3 Range Rovers, fancy cars like a Rolls Royce and 4 Harley Davidson motorcycles. Roughly a dozen people were arrested and charged, and this included the Comanchero's president of Auckland, Pasilika Naufahu, and he and others have pleaded not guilty to charges that were laid against them, and they'll go to trial in September next year. That's set down for 8 weeks.
Okay, so we have been hearing a bit about this particular gang with various cases before the court, haven't we?
Yes, yeah. The Comancheros has come up in a number of court cases this year, and people would remember in a number of trials and news reports as well. Not to conflate them, but there have been, for instance, this year there was a big murder trial. 3 Comanchero members were jailed for life afterwards in July and August for the murder and attempted murder of Abraham Tu'uhiava and his wife Yolanda. People may remember that Mr. Tu'uhiava was a Patch Nomads gang member who was shot dead in an execution-style killing in a rural part of Mangere. And his wife Yolanda was also shot twice in the head and miraculously survived purely by playing dead and pretending that she was dead in the grass on the side of the road. We do know that a number of people that are cropping up in these cases were living in Australia before they were deported back to New Zealand after Section 501 of Australia's Migration Act was changed. And so these deportees, many will know, have been nicknamed the 501s, and we've seen and will continue to see them pop up in these cases.
And that's court reporter Annika Smith. Scientists say it took a lot of ingenuity and a little luck to record the first ever heart rate from a blue whale. They found that they survive on as little as 2 beats per minute when they dive down for food. Michelle Hennessy reports.
How do you measure the heart rate of the world's largest creature without using restraint? Well, a team of scientists said they used a lot of ingenuity and a little luck to capture the first ever recording of a blue whale's beating heart. The team used non-invasive suction cups packed with sensors and successfully attached them near the whale's flipper. The sensors went on a day-long ride with the world's largest species and found the massive mammal can survive with just 2 beats per minute when it lunges under the ocean's surface looking for food. The maximum heart rate it recovered was 37 beats per minute when it returned to the surface. That's compared to an average of around 80 for humans and upwards of 1,000 for the world's smallest mammals. Blue whales can weigh 200 tons, and the lead author of the paper said they were trying to figure out what life is like when you're that big. Jeremy Goldbogen said they had no idea whether it would work or whether they'd even find a blue whale in the first place. In a Stanford University press release, he said the whales might be particularly susceptible to changes in their environment that could affect their food supply, which could make studies like these key to the conservation of the endangered species.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. First off, the rodeo, the one near Whangarei, that's not going ahead this year. They say it's for financial reasons, and protesters say it's because it's outdated and people have become concerned with animal welfare issues. Mixed response here. Matt says enjoying watching animals in distress is not traditional, it is sick. Nick says rodeo is animal cruelty, it's outdated and past its sell-by date. They had high definition cameras banned in these places. What does that tell you? The sooner we ban this cruel sport, the better, says Nick. This one, though, says, Rodeo? Leave it alone. Or next, the fun police will be banning duck shooting, pig hunting, hunting of all sorts, and sooner or later, recreational fishing. This is our country and our culture. If you don't like it, don't come here, that person says. Rodeos belong, like Simon Bridges' thinking, in the 18th century. Someone has messaged us. Others say, load of rubbish, bring on the rodeos. And some other ones, rodeos have had their day. This one from Jason in Napier, who says, the only rodeo I went to as a young boy was in the mid-1970s in central Hawke's Bay. A bucking horse rolled over the top of a barrier fence and fatally crushed a baby in a pram just metres from where I stood. I have never been back to a rodeo since, says Jason. On the power outages in Northland and the far north, some of you have got in touch to say, Beth has said, I have 2 battery-operated radios and charged my phone with a power pack so I could get both Radio New Zealand and the internet for information. Thanks for sticking with us, Beth. And this person says all school children sent home early in Doubtless Bay, giving us teachers a chance to write reports. Kids and teachers did not complain. Not sure about the parents, though, this person says. On the Raptor squad that National is suggesting we emulate here, James says the Nats should start breeding actual raptors and make them the special police. What could possibly go wrong, says James. Michael says if Simon Bridges really is concerned with crime, perhaps having a heavy target on white-collar crime, especially tax evasion. The money recovered could go towards social services.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. A truck driver who ran a red light and killed 2 people has escaped a prison sentence. Casey James Winter pleaded guilty to careless driving, causing the deaths of Fulumua Daly and his 12-year-old nephew Ezekiel Tinielu Loua in August. In the Christchurch District Court this afternoon, Winter was sentenced to 4 months community detention, community work and disqualified from driving for a year and a half. He'll also pay $20,000 to the victim's family. The court heard powerful statements from the family of the deceased and the injured. David Fuatai, whose 4-year-old son was seriously injured in the crash, told Winter he was ready to let his anger go.
For my sake, Winter, Casey, I forgive you. For my sake. We all make mistakes. This is yours, and it's one that you'll have to live with.
David Fuatai. The court heard how Judge Tony Couch believed Winter to be remorseful. The immigration industry says Trump-style extreme vetting is being used to keep a lid on immigration numbers. New residents fell to the lowest level since the turn of the century this year, despite a sharp increase in applications. Jill Bonnet reports.
The Association for Migration and Investment says officials are now asking immigrants for information in a piecemeal manner. It questions whether there are ulterior motives to the change in practices. An immigration advisor, Tony Alexander, says the orders to do that are coming from the top to slow down the number of visa approvals. Immigration New Zealand denies there's an attempt to slow down visa processing. It says visa application volumes and their complexity and risk have been increasing steadily across all categories, and they request additional information if they need it. This is Jill Bonnet.
The outgoing chair of Hawke's Bay District Health Board says he's disappointed and embarrassed his future as a chair is being played out in the media with no communication from the Health Minister about his role. Kevin Atkinson told a board meeting this afternoon that he only re-stood for election after being reassured by David Clark in August that he would be reappointed as chair if re-elected. He was subsequently the top polling candidate. Mr Atkinson says reports the Minister is now considering another candidate for the chair position are in complete conflict with what he was told.
I find it sort of disappointing after giving 20 years service to the organisation, 19 of those as chair, that I'm personally put in a situation like this at the moment.
Kevin Atkinson. A former Australian detective has ridiculed the National Party's zero-tolerance approach to gangs, saying the strategy has been a disaster across the ditch. The party's leader, Simon Bridges, has repeatedly described New South Wales Strike Force Raptor team as a huge success and an example to follow. He's even pointed to media reports which claim the squad's uncompromising approach has driven bikies to near extinction. But a former New South Wales detective, Mike Kennedy, says Mr Bridges is dreaming. Dr Kennedy, who's now a senior lecturer at the University of Western Sydney, says the Raptor team has simply driven gangs underground. He says there's no evidence it's worked, and instead he says it's turned the public against the police. A Christchurch demolition firm says a new waste levy on construction and demolition waste is a kick in the guts. The government this morning announced plans to introduce a landfill levy of up to $20 per tonne to construction and demolition fills. It's also proposing to increase the general waste landfill levy from the current $10 per tonne to as much as $60 per tonne by 2023. Canterbury Demolition Director Lionel Green says he fears larger firms will be able to absorb the cost of the levy more than smaller companies. Mr Green says it means small companies like his may get priced out of the market.
At the height of after the earthquakes, what's been dumped today, there's thousands of tonnes, so it's a lot of money involved. And like I said before, that in every of this is going to be a cost to the client.
Lionel Green of Canterbury Demolition. The police in Auckland are increasingly concerned about the number of drivers who ignore the flashing lights and sirens of emergency vehicles. They say it's becoming more of a problem on the city's motorways, with drivers failing to pull over or give way. Inspector Scott Webb says ambulances, fire engines and police cars need to get to emergencies fast, so it's crucial motorists move out of the way as soon as possible. Mr Webb says on a single lane road, people need to indicate and pull over to the left and wait for emergency services to pass. On multi-lane roads, people should slow down, indicate and get into the left lane. It's 6:05. Both pace bowler Trent Boult and all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme have been ruled out of the second cricket test against England in Hamilton due to injury. Boult suffered a rib injury in the first test win, and scans have shown he has a muscle strain, while de Grandhomme has torn an abdominal muscle. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
The uncapped Northern Districts all-rounder Daryl Mitchell has been called into the squad and looms as a like-for-like replacement for de Grandhomme in the playing 11. Bolt's unavailability all but ensures fast bowler Lockie Ferguson will make his test debut. Meanwhile, the England fast bowler Jofra Archer has expressed disappointment that spectators didn't intervene in the wake of racial slurs directed at him by a member of the crowd during the first test against New Zealand at Mount Maunganui. In his column in the Daily Mail newspaper, Archer wrote that he didn't want to go into the details of what was said, but he thought members of the crowd may have pulled up the man making the comments. This is Stephen Hewson.
5 Grand Slam champions will compete at the Women's ASB Tennis Classic in Auckland in January. 3 more Grand Slam champions have signed on today, with former world number 1 Caroline Wozniacki, 2017 French Open champion Yelena Ostapenko and Russian legend Svetlana Kuznetsova all confirmed. They join 2 other Grand Slam winners, Bianca Andreescu and Serena Williams. Tournament director Carl Budge says they've managed to assemble their strongest field ever, and it's all down to word of mouth.
The reputation in the dressing room is incredibly strong. The players are our biggest advocates, and if we can keep them saying wonderful things about us, then we'll continue to get people wanting to come here and see what this is all about.
Carl Budge, the Tennis Classic director. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Anthony Elliott on artificial intelligence. It's not the future, it's here already. We just haven't noticed it yet. We've got a window on the world of Catherine Joy. She studies moon rocks. She thinks they'll rock your world too. And then there's Daniel Zaka, who's been tracking S5 HVS1, the fastest moving star in the galaxy. Hopefully it's not headed our way. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland mainly fine tonight. A few showers developing tomorrow afternoon, turning to rain at night. Wellington and Hortolwhenua Kapiti Coast, fine weather, cloudy periods tomorrow. For the remainder of the North Island, fine tonight, isolated afternoon and evening showers tomorrow, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. To Nelson and Bulla, mainly fine tonight, a few showers developing tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud. Norwesterly gales about Canterbury High Country. Chance of a shower in southern Canterbury tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms for Fiordland and South Westland. Otago and Southland, scattered rain, heavy and possibly thundery about inland Clutha, Dunedin and North Otago tomorrow. Chatham Islands, fine tonight, cloudy tomorrow. RNZ National, it's just past 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The jury in the High Court murder trial of Vinod Scantha is understood to be close to a verdict. The 32-year-old former Dunedin doctor has been on trial for the past 3.5 weeks. He denies killing 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush in her bedroom in February last year. Vinod Scantha is also accused of threatening to kill the prosecution's key witness and his family. The jury of 10 men and 2 women retired to decide on his guilt or innocence about 2:45 this afternoon, and we'll bring you the latest as soon as we have it. Getting rid of your rubbish could cost a bit more, with the government eyeing big boosts to the cost of dumping waste in landfills. Under a proposal announced this morning, the landfill levy will rise from $10 a tonne to as much as $60 a tonne by 2023. New Zealanders have sent more than 30 million tonnes of trash to the tip over the past 10 years, and the volumes being dumped continue to climb. The government says charging Kiwis more to get rid of their waste will encourage recycling, but there's concern it will create more illegal dumping instead. Christchurch reporter Anand Zaki has the story.
At Christchurch's Eco Drop, getting rid of some household junk, an old couch, a desk, a mattress, along with other bits and pieces of general rubbish weighing 200 kilograms, will currently cost $53.98. And that's without the cost of hiring a trailer if you don't own one. But under the government's proposed changes, that could be up to $10 higher by 2023. The increased levy will mean dumping costs rise to as much as $60 a tonne, but that will vary across the country depending on the council and the tip. Associate Environment Minister Eugenie Sage says the increase is needed to encourage people to recycle.
The volumes of waste going to landfill are rising. And incredibly, New Zealand is one of the highest producers of municipal waste in the developed world per capita. So in the last 10 years, we sent nearly 30 million tonnes of waste to municipal landfills around the country.
Half of the revenue raised from the levy will go to councils to fund resource recovery and other waste-related infrastructure. The remaining money will go to the Waste Minimisation Fund, which provides grants for waste reduction. Eugenie Sage isn't fazed by the possibility of a rise in fly tipping as a result of the increased costs.
What councils need to do is focus on enforcement, and Auckland Council has made a major investment in countering fly tipping by more enforcement. In terms of the impact on individual households, it's estimated that it would be about 30 cents a rubbish bag.
Ms Sage says the revenue from the levy could potentially be used in the future towards enforcement costs. But the levy will also be extended to cover other landfill types such as construction and demolition, which is one of the country's biggest waste producers. Those rubbish types face a potential levy of $20 per tonne. Lionel Green, who's a director at Canterbury Demolition, says that will be a kick in the guts for small companies like his.
At the height of after the earthquakes, what's been dumped today, there's thousands of tonnes, so it's a lot of money involved. And like I said before, that in every of this is going to be a cost to the client.
Mr Green says if Canterbury Demolition cannot compete with larger firms, he fears it will be priced out of the market. Meanwhile, on the streets of Christchurch, opinion was mixed on the potential rise in the cost of dumping waste.
If you're a low-income earner, a lot of people aren't going to do that because they just can't afford it. So they're going to obviously, not saying that everyone's going to do it, but there's going to be the ones that are just going to just chuck it on the side of the street and expect the rubbish guys to pick it up for them because they just can't afford to take it themselves.
I don't have a problem paying extra if it's going to help in the long run with community side of things, so yeah.
Depends what the waste reduction projects are, I guess, doesn't it? And I guess the council, they're always grabbing money where they can, don't they?
The National Party's environment spokesperson Scott Simpson has criticised the proposal. He says the levy rate will not only cost households more, but will lead to more fly tipping. Consultation on the landfill levy expansion is now open and will close in February next year. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, ko Anand Zaki tēnei.
It's 13 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Heartbroken supporters of a heritage church building in West Auckland watched as it was demolished today. A small group of locals gathered outside St Andrew's Sunday School Hall in Newlyn to say goodbye to the old building for the last time. Our camera operator Patrice Allen and reporter Jessie Chang were there.
Built in 1928, the church is one of the oldest heritage buildings in the area. It's listed as a Category B building by Auckland Council, which means it is a place of significant heritage value. For Diane Sisley, St Andrew's Sunday School Hall on Margan Avenue holds many fond memories for her family.
My granddad was a church elder, so my mother, who's 94 now, Doreen, she can remember tap dancing. She was in a tap dancing troupe, and when World War II soldiers were here, they were dancing in their beautiful outfits, and many lovely concerts were held here and dances, and of course the bagpipes, because 80% of Newland residents were of Scottish descent.
Diane Sisley says it was her ancestors who supplied the bricks to build the church.
My mother was the great-granddaughter of William Johnson Parker of the Gardner and Parker Brickworks, and Gardner and Parker Brickworks supplied 200,000 bricks, free of course.
She says if her grandfather was here, he would have liked it if the church was used as a homeless shelter.
My heart is heavy. I'm about to cry. But yeah, no, I'm very sad, and I think we really need to put effort into preserving our history.
Emotions were also running high for Penny Laybourne from the Newland Protection Society.
I did really well up because I had expected not to see the big pitched roof on the skyline as I walked over the rise from home, but she's still there, and it made me happy that I could get one more glimpse of the building and just remember.
And as RNZ was talking to Penny Laybourne, demolition crews started to ask bystanders to leave the area directly outside the church. Yellow tape was rolled out and orange cones were laid out on a part of Margan Avenue. It was a sad sight for Ms Laybourne, who has been campaigning for 5 years to save St Andrew's Sunday School. It's currently privately owned, and the local says she's been trying to work with the owner to restore the building.
Every time I talk to him, the story changes. One day he wants to save the church wall, and one day he's asking me how can he demolish it, and the next day he wants to chop the Pūtakawa tree.
Penny Laybourne hopes at the very least they'll be able to save the bricks of the church from going to the landfill. Former councillor for the ward Ross Clow says Auckland Council departments should have worked together more efficiently to prevent the church being destroyed.
You've got a demolition order being issued by one side of council, the compliance people then have to follow that. The heritage people are saying, hey, slow down, we want to try and save this, and you're going, wow, this is a multi-headed monster being the council.
But Auckland Council denies that its heritage unit and its compliance investigations team haven't been talking to each other. It says after inspections it issued a dangerous building notice in late March. An independent engineering consultancy also confirmed that the church was immediately dangerous and at risk of collapse. The council says all avenues were considered to save the church, but demolition was the only safe option. It says an investigation is open and ongoing into the circumstances of St Andrew's Sunday School Hall. The owner of the building has been contacted. I tamaki makouro o te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
And in breaking news, police in Levin have launched a homicide inquiry after the death of an elderly woman. The 90-year-old woman was assaulted in Bath Street, Levin, on the 2nd of November, and she has now died. And the homicide investigation has been launched today. 3 young women previously arrested in relation to this alleged offending remain before the courts. And Detective Senior Sergeant Craig Sheridan says the investigation is ongoing and they're continuing to make a number of inquiries. They say the next stage of the investigation will be a post-mortem. Just to repeat, the 90-year-old woman who was assaulted in Bath Street, this was in Levin at the beginning of November, has now died. Let's go to America now. In Washington, Democrats have announced the next phase of the impeachment investigation into US President Donald Trump. They've offered Mr. Trump and his lawyers the opportunity to question witnesses who'll be making the case to oust him from office. Hearings before the House Judiciary Committee began this week, and the ABC's Julia Holman reports.
Later this week, millions of Americans will sit down for a turkey dinner, the annual Thanksgiving tradition.
Thank you very much.
But earlier, 2 turkeys narrowly escaped the butcher's knife, thanks to an act of mercy by Donald Trump.
Today I will issue a pardon to a pair of very handsome birds, Butter and his alternate bread.
The traditional Thanksgiving presidential turkey pardon gave Mr. Trump the opportunity to get into other meaty issues consuming Washington.
Thankfully, bread and butter have been specially raised by the Jacksons to remain calm under any condition, which will be very important because they've already received subpoenas to appear in Adam Schiff's basement on Thursday.
Democrat Adam Schiff is the head of the House Intelligence Committee, which last week investigated claims that the president pressured Ukraine to announce an inquiry into his political rival, Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden. President Trump continued the joke at the expense of Democrats and the press.
It seems the Democrats are accusing me of being too soft on turkey. But bread and butter, I should note that unlike previous witnesses, you and I have actually met. In any event, I expect this pardon will be a very popular one with the media. After all, turkeys are closely related to vultures.
Donald Trump and his team have a new round of investigations to turn their minds to. The head of the House Judiciary Committee has written to the president offering him and his staff the chance to question witnesses who will appear at a new set of hearings. The New York Times reports that the witness list hasn't been finalised, but that it will comprise of constitutional scholars who will help the committee decide whether the president's alleged crimes warrant his removal from office. The Judiciary Committee convened a similar panel in 1998 when it was deciding whether to impeach President Bill Clinton. And this move by the Democrats signals they're moving from the investigation phase to the implementation phase. But the American people are divided about impeachment.
Well, a new CNN poll finds public opinion has not changed despite the huge focus on the impeachment hearings.
CNN is reporting that Americans are split down party lines and split down the middle over their support for and against the president's removal.
50% of the Americans polled still think President Trump should be impeached and removed from office. That is the same finding from our October poll. There is roughly an 80% difference between Democratic support for Trump's removal and Republican support for it.
Although Democrats insist their campaign is above polls and politics. Congressman Steve Cohen.
This is not about polls, it's not about politics, it's about our oath of office. Nevertheless, it concerns me that we're so divided.
But Erin Perrine, who's on Donald Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, says the Democrats' strategy to oust the president is backfiring.
The more Democrats go and try to impeach this president, they're bringing more supporters into the campaign. We raised $15 million in 3 days. So keep it up, Democrats. You're making it easier for us to win again in 2020.
The House Judiciary Committee's hearings will commence in the middle of next week. So far, Donald Trump is yet to confirm if he and his team will take part.
Julia Holman in Washington. Survivors of an earthquake in Albania are spending the night outdoors as dozens of aftershocks rattle the region. At least 23 people have been killed in the 6.4 magnitude quake. Volunteers and sniffer dogs from several southern European countries are assisting in the search for more survivors. CNN's Nina DeSantos reports.
Buried alive. Local residents, emergency services and military personnel scour the rubble. There's still hope for some, less for others. The region's most powerful earthquake in decades struck during the early hours of Tuesday morning.
It was a real horror, so I tried to get out of my home and went through the glass door. I cut myself badly.
According to the United States Geological Survey, the epicenter of the 6.4 magnitude quake was the coastal town of Durrës, 36 kilometres or 22 miles west of Albania's capital, Tirana. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama's office updated the death toll upwards several times on Tuesday. The Health Ministry confirmed at least 325 people have been injured. Worryingly for potential survivors, aftershocks continue to be felt. Rescue efforts were forced to halt on multiple occasions throughout the day on Tuesday. The Prime Minister tweeted to say that nearby countries, including Italy, Serbia, Montenegro and Greece, have been assisting with the recovery operation. He went on, "This is a very dramatic, difficult time. However, we must keep calm and stand by each other to get through this together. We will do everything we can within our power, together with the support of our great friends, to overcome this situation." Albania is the poorest country in Europe, according to Eurostat, with a typical income less than a third of the European average. The United States and the European Union both pledged their support. The Balkans is an area prone to seismic activity. Among the worst, in 1979, a magnitude 6.9 quake hit Albania, leaving 136 dead and more than 1,000 injured. 40 years later, the citizens of Albania have suffered another deadly tremor.
Nina De Santos reporting. We're getting a lot of feedback from you this evening, so let's get to some of it, shall we? Let's talk about the police warning drivers, particularly in Auckland, to remember to pull over to the left if they're coming up behind you with their lights and sirens on, heading to emergency situations. They're concerned increasingly people aren't getting out of their way. Now, a lot of you getting in touch about this. Lou says, "I would be interested to know what I should do in this case. I am stopped at a red traffic light and an emergency vehicle stops behind me with lights flashing and siren going. Should I drive through the red light or should I wait until the light turns green?" Interesting conundrum, Lou. The main problem that we could see in the video and talking to the inspector was it's actually when they're on the motorway, not stopped anywhere, with people in the fast lane not moving left. I can't answer that one for you, but generally speaking, if you check out the video on our webpage and Facebook page, you'll see the main examples they're talking about. Kevin from Bluff says, "Pulling to the left for sirens is basic driver's licence stuff. Those idiots are driving towards other vehicles." On the other side of the coin, this person says, "Maybe we plonkers can't move to the left because we have another car in the lane on our left and we're stopped at the traffic lights." Yep, totally take your point. Again, urge you to have a look at the video on our website because that's not exactly the examples the emergency services are talking about. And this one in says, "It's an education thing. Many immigrants have different rules in their countries when faced with an emergency vehicle. We need to ensure that information is made loud and clear in the road rules or have inductions for new citizens." The other issue that a lot of you are getting in touch about is this proposed strike force raptor that the National Party is suggesting we model an anti-gang unit on this Australian example. Alan has got in touch to say, "Strike Force Raptor sounds more like something out of a juvenile comic book than an adult political party policy." And also Ian has a different view on this though, says, "Solid policy idea to crack down on the gangs. It is well known that they are actively involved in crime and the wearing of patches is clearly undertaken to intimidate. Why should we tolerate this type of conduct?" Hey, thanks for getting in touch with that, Ian. And George says, "If we want to change the gangs, surely a specialised communication unit would be better than an aggressive police unit." Actually, I'm just getting word from my producer here. Sorry to interrupt your feedback. And we have a verdict in from the jury in the Bernard Scanther murder trial. The former Dunedin doctor has been found guilty of murder. So in news just to hand, the High Court jury in the trial of Bernard Scanther has returned a guilty verdict on the charge of murder. Now, just to recap, this is the 32-year-old former Dunedin doctor who's been on trial for the last 3.5 weeks. The Crown case was that he killed 16-year-old Amber Rose Rush in her bedroom in February last year by stabbing her to death. the jury of 10 men and 2 women. Now, they retired to start their deliberations at about 2:45 this afternoon. So that jury has now returned just a few minutes ago with a guilty verdict on the murder charge for that 32-year-old former Dunedin doctor. Our reporter, Timothy Brown, has been covering that trial for the last 3.5 weeks, and we will cross to him as soon as he is out of court. As we say, the court just receiving that verdict from the jury, who started their deliberations at about 2:45 this afternoon. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for Timothy to come out of court, let me just bring you up to date with the other feedback that's coming in. And as soon as we're able to talk to Timothy, we will. So I was saying that Doug has got in touch to say that if we want to be wiping out these gangs, that maybe we should have a specialised communication unit, and it would be better than an aggressive policing unit. Kevin has got in touch to say, I can understand why National Simon Bridges is not a practising lawyer. Kevin says a smart person or lawyer never asks a question that they don't already know the answer to. Never mind makes a statement they can't back up without several other sources. And Ray Lilly has got in touch from Martinborough. Thanks for sending us a message, Ray. And Ray says the Strike Force Raptor is no more than dog whistling to try and ramp up law and order voters once again. Tired old garbage for traditional National Party and New Zealand first support bases. And also a few of you getting in touch about the rubbish situation. This is the cost of dumping rubbish going up. Frank says in Dunedin, when they put up the price a few years ago, rotters just drove out to way off places and dumped their rubbish down a bank somewhere. We see it all the time when we are doing possum control work. And Frank is not the only person who has concerns about that. Although someone else has got in touch to say 10 New Zealand dollars a tonne of rubbish is ridiculously cheap. Even $60 is the proposed levy is extremely low, and the increase should go to at least 100 New Zealand dollars per tonne. Okay, we're going to return to our earlier story. This is the jury in the Bernard Scanther murder trial have returned a verdict. This is the 32-year-old former Dunedin doctor who's been on trial for the past 3.5 weeks. He denied the charges. Timothy Brown, our reporter who's been covering this case for 3.5 weeks, is on the line now. Timothy, can you tell us what's happened?
Good evening, Lisa. Bernard Scanther has been found guilty on all counts that he faced before the court. That is one count of murdering Amber Rose Rush just before midnight on February the 2nd last year, as well as 4 counts of threatening to kill. Those relate to the prosecution's key witness and his family. So what was the reaction in court? The defendant was led away soon after that was read out, while the judge thanked the jury for their service over the past 3 weeks. When the defendant returned, he didn't say a word. He had his head bowed, and he will be sentenced in March next year. What about Amber Rose Rush's family? Her mother